Hey friends, it's Kira again. I hope you're well. Today I'm doing another nose study, but this time I decided to include the mouth just to ground it a little bit. And as I did before, I drew everything out on my iPad using Procreate just because I like how the tools work so that I can nudge lines, easily erase, things like that. Transferring it to some tracing paper and bringing it back to my Arteza sketchbook. I'm using the Earth-Friendly watercolor palette by Da Vinci in conjunction with Denise Soden from In Liquid Color again. And this is an interesting palette to work with. I was trying to go for a skin tone that I'm more used to depicting, which is kind of a darker one. I think that was one of my issues with the last study that I did. Was I was working with a fair skinned model, and that's I don't paint a lot of white people. I'm sorry. So one thing that I did there was I actually started with a full wash, just kind of going over all of the skin area, and then I left a highlight on the tip of the nose, and then went in and used a wet brush just to kind of smooth out those edges so they wouldn't be so harsh. And now I'm kind of going in and building up the shadows, just kind of creating a little more form. And I did an accident there. I have this bad habit of setting my hand in wet paint, sometimes on the palette, usually on the painting. And what I did there was I just tried to blot it off. But I'm going to go in with a firm filament brush right there and try and lift it. You just barely get the brush wet and just kind of scrub the paper gently and then blot it away. I was using Indian Throne Blue, which is a staining color, so that's why that didn't work. But it's okay. I'll incorporate it. I think Bob Ross used to say there are no mistakes in art, just happy accidents. And I think I turned this one into a nice, happy little accident. In my experience in working with these face studies is that noses and nostrils are weird. It's really hard to try and depict them in a way that doesn't make them appear super flat. At least that's what I've found. Just going in and adding more definition, adding a little shading under the nose just to kind of imply that it's further down. I'm sorry about the autofocus. I'm using a webcam to do all of my filming, and it's annoying. I actually struggled a lot with this study. I was having trouble getting values right, getting textures right, specifically with the lips, just because I hadn't worked on lips this close up before. And I'm not using a black paint. I'm mixing a chromatic black by mixing my warm red and my Indian Throne Blue with a little bit of yellow. One way I like to think about blacks is that they're just desaturated purples, so you can go ahead and mix a purple and then add in a yellow just to get that deeper tone. Whenever you use, I believe it's called a chromatic black like that, it actually helps to unify the piece a little more and just makes it look a little more realistic, because black isn't typically found in nature, at least pure black. Like, you can use black paint. I'm not shaming anyone who does. If that's, your method for working, by all means, keep it up. But oftentimes that I find that if you are going to use black, it's a really wise idea to at least mix it with another color, or just do a thin glaze over it just to kind of tint it just a little bit, just to make it match with the piece a little more. But if you're not painting realism or painting things from life, you do you. So these lips that I was painting were very, very round. And the light was coming from just off center. So that's one of the reasons I was having some trouble. This is when I literally had a thought of, oh God, I ruined it. Just because I had the right side of the lips go down a little more than the left, and it made things look really kind of awkward and unbalanced. But that's okay. I think I saved it. Just adding in more shadows, using a damp brush to blend them up. One of the things about lips is that the top lip is almost always going to be darker than the bottom lip, just because of how the face is formed with how the shadows fall if you're going from a front lit or slightly elevated lit picture or person if you're painting from life. Mixing up more black to get the nostrils all nice and dark. I'm blending it out with a wet brush. Dropping in more color just to let it feather out naturally. I like to drop in color on a piece and then use water to blend it out. I find it gives me more control than just wetting the entire area and just dropping color in. There, I'm doing the under lip shadow and blending it out. And if you notice there, something I did was I dropped in the color, used a clean wet brush to blend it out, and then dropped in more color because I find that I have trouble with my mixing sometimes of getting it dark enough and anticipating how much it's going to lighten. So that's a fun little trick you can use. This is whenever I was adding in the creases in the lips. I actually ended up using kind of a dry brushing technique for this. I figured, at this point I was just like, well, I mean, kind of can't mess it up any more than I already have. And that's one of the great things about working in a sketchbook is, if you don't want to, no one has to see it. And you can kind of constantly learn from the mistakes. In fact, you actually kind of learn more from the mistakes than you do from the successes, at least in my experience. Because it forces you to think, outside of the box. And this dry brushing technique that I'm using right now is actually what I use to paint bark and like highly textured things. Just going in with some fine lines, just to give it a little more oomph. In the center of the lips, at least with fuller lips, that's usually where the deepest shadow is going to be. And that's another technique I like to use. I like to, especially if I'm using staining colors, I like to just kind of drop some color in and then blot it off. So I find that helps to kind of layer it a little more. I was going in with the highlights with the white gel pen. And just kind of really defining that lip crease. And this is how I fixed that happy little accident. I gave the person a Monroe piercing. Just went and outlined it with a pencil, added a shadow to the right side of it, and I'm going to add a bright highlight to the left side of it. Since metal's obscenely shiny, it kind of reflects everything around it, and that's kind of where the light source was coming from. Then I went in and added the small shadow of the actual piercing. And there we go. Thank you so much for coming to view my video. I hope you stay safe out there and have a great day. Thanks. Bye.